It was one of those nights when the coffee shop felt more like an office than a place to grab a quick drink. The kind of night where the guy sitting by the window wasn't really thinking about anything, except the lines of code staring back at him from his laptop screen. He'd been coming to this place for 3 years now, ever since it opened on the corner of 5th and Main. The owner knew his order by heart: black coffee, no sugar, extra shot. The music was always just loud enough to focus, but not so loud that it became a distraction. The guy was in his mid-40s, the type of person who'd built something from nothing. He wore expensive clothes, but they weren't flashy. The kind that said he had money but didn't need to prove it to anyone. He ran one of the bigger tech companies in the city, the kind that made software solutions for other companies. The kind of work that most people didn't really understand, but that kept the digital world running. Tonight, though, he wasn't thinking about being a CEO or running a company. He was stuck on a problem. For 3 weeks, his team had been wrestling with a bug in their latest project. It wasn't just any bug. It was the kind that showed up in the code like a ghost. Sometimes it was there, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it broke everything, sometimes it didn't do much of anything. His lead developers had spent countless hours trying to find it, but nothing seemed to work. They'd tried different approaches, tested different solutions, stayed up late going through line after line of code. Nothing stuck. Tonight, he decided to take the problem home with him, or rather to the coffee shop, hoping that a change of scenery might help him see something his team had missed. He'd been sitting there for about 2 hours when he decided to take a break. His eyes were getting tired from staring at the screen, and his shoulders were starting to hurt from leaning forward. He got up, stretched a bit, and walked to the counter to order another coffee. The waitress who usually worked this shift was busy with another customer, so he waited. He was thinking about something his developer had said earlier that day, some piece of logic that didn't quite add up. His mind was somewhere else entirely when he got his coffee and walked back to his table. What he saw when he returned made him stop dead in his tracks. Someone was sitting at his table. Someone was using his laptop. His first instinct was anger. Not the angry where you yell and make a scene, but the cold kind of angry where your chest gets tight and your jaw clenches. His laptop had all his company's code on it. Sensitive stuff. Proprietary stuff. The kind of thing that could cost him millions if it fell into the wrong hands. He walked over quickly, ready to say something sharp. Ready to ask what the hell this person thought they were doing. But then he stopped himself. The waitress, he'd seen her around. Served him coffee maybe 100 times over the past 3 years, though he'd never really paid attention to her name, was completely focused on the screen. Her fingers were moving across the keyboard with a rhythm and purpose that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't randomly typing. She wasn't just messing around or playing a game. She was actually working. Her expression was serious, concentrated, the kind of look someone gets when they're solving a puzzle that actually matters to them. He decided not to say anything right away. He pulled out a chair and sat down at the table next to his, close enough to see the screen but not so close that he was breathing down her neck. He watched. He listened. The waitress didn't seem to notice him at first. She kept working, her eyes scanning the code, her fingers moving, making changes here and there. Then she stopped, leaned back and looked at the screen like she was thinking about something. After a few seconds, she leaned forward again and made another change. She did this a few times, this pattern of working and then thinking and then working again. It was the kind of thing you did when you actually understood the problem, when you weren't just guessing. A few minutes passed like this. He found himself getting interested instead of angry. This wasn't normal. This didn't make sense. Who was this person? And why did she seem to know her way around code the way she clearly did? Finally, the waitress looked up. She seemed surprised to see him sitting there, but she didn't look scared or guilty or caught. She looked calm. She looked like someone who had just been doing their job and happened to get interrupted. "I know I shouldn't have done that," she said, before he could say anything. "But I heard you talking about this bug like 2 weeks ago with those guys from your office. You were talking about it here at the table, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I saw your laptop was open when I came back to get your empty cup, and I couldn't help myself." He didn't know what to say. He just looked at her. "I think I found it," she said. She turned the laptop toward him so he could see the screen better. "See here? This piece of logic doesn't match up with the structure you're using over here. When the function tries to call back to this memory address, it's looking in the wrong place. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. depending on what's already loaded in the cache. That's why it's so random. She started pointing to different parts of the code, explaining her thinking. She talked about memory management and function calls and something about asynchronous operations that he'd actually been thinking about but couldn't quite make work. She showed him changes she'd made. Simple changes, elegant changes, changes that somehow made complete sense the moment she explained them. He realized he was listening to someone who actually knew what they were talking about, not someone pretending, not someone who'd Googled something and thought they understood. Someone who genuinely understood the problem at a level that was pretty sophisticated. "How long have you been programming?" he asked. 5 years, pretty seriously, she said. "I got a degree in computer science. I worked at a startup for a while, but it didn't work out. I've been doing freelance stuff mostly, on the side. The waitressing pays the bills while I look for real work." "Why haven't you found anything?" he asked. It seemed impossible that someone with this kind of skill would still be working as a waitress. She shrugged. "It's harder than you'd think. I don't have the right connections. I'm self-taught for a lot of things, and some places want you to have a specific background or specific experience. I apply places and either I don't hear back or they give the job to someone else. I don't know. It just hasn't worked out yet." He looked at the code again. He looked at the changes she'd made. He ran through the logic in his head and everything checked out. More than that, it was good. It was really good. This wasn't just someone who knew how to code. This was someone who thought about code the right way. "What's your name?" he asked. "I'm," she said, and told him. He nodded slowly. He'd walked past this person hundreds of times. She'd refilled his coffee countless times. He'd never really looked at her. He'd been too busy thinking about his own life, his own problems, his own work. Now he couldn't stop looking at her. He sat there for a moment, just processing what had just happened. His coffee was getting cold in his hands. Around him, the coffee shop continued on like normal. People typed on their laptops, had conversations, scrolled through their phones. Nobody else seemed to notice that something significant had just shifted in that small corner by the window. "Can you walk me through this again?" he asked. "The whole thing? From the beginning? How you figured this out?" She pulled the chair closer and leaned over the laptop. She was calm, like she did this kind of thing every day. Like she wasn't nervous about explaining her work to the CEO of a major tech company, even though she probably didn't know that's who he was. Or maybe she did. Maybe she'd seen his picture somewhere. He wasn't sure it mattered. "Okay, so when you were talking about it before," she said, "you mentioned that the error was random, that it showed up sometimes but not always. That's the key thing, right? If something only breaks sometimes, it usually means it's dependent on state. Like it depends on what's already happening in the system at that moment." He nodded. This was basic stuff, but he wanted to hear her think through it. "So I started looking at where the data was being stored and retrieved, and I noticed that you're using synchronous calls here." She pointed to one section of code. "But then you're also trying to do asynchronous operations here and here. So depending on which operation finishes first, the data might be in different places in memory. Sometimes the cache has it, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, the function tries to look somewhere else and fails." "And the fix?" he asked. "You need to make sure the state is consistent before you try to access it. You could use a lock here," she pointed. "Or you could restructure it so that you're waiting for the asynchronous call to complete before you move forward. Either way works, but I think the lock is cleaner for your use case. It's less overhead." She typed a few more things, showing him the exact implementation. It was elegant. It was simple. It was the kind of solution that made you wonder why you hadn't seen it yourself. "Why didn't your team catch this?" she asked. He laughed, but it was a real laugh, not an annoyed one. "That's what I want to know. I've got 3 developers who are supposed to be senior level, and they missed it. You figured it out in what, 10 minutes? "I wasn't trying to solve it at first," she said. "I was just looking at the code because I was curious. I heard you talking about it, and I guess it just stuck in my head. When I saw the actual code, it was like, I don't know. It just jumped out at me, like when you read something wrong the first time and then you read it again and you see it." They talked for another hour after that, not just about the code, but about how she'd gotten interested in programming, what kind of projects she'd worked on, what she liked to build. She told him about the startup that didn't work out. Turns out it had run out of money, and she'd been let go along with half the team. She'd spent a few months looking for work, applying to places, going to interviews. Nothing stuck. So she took the waitressing job to pay her rent, and she'd been working on freelance projects on the side ever since. How many projects? He asked. About 15 or 20, I think. Mostly small stuff. Some optimization work. Some building custom features for people who had specific needs. It doesn't pay much, but it's something. And it keeps my skills sharp. Do you have a portfolio? He asked. Yeah, online. I can send you the link if you want. He gave her his email address. He wasn't usually the type to do this kind of thing. He didn't hire people he met randomly at coffee shops. But this was different. This felt different. Before she left that night, after her shift ended, he asked her one more question. Why are you still doing this? Working as a waitress, I mean. You clearly have the skills to do something better. She looked down at her apron like she was considering how to answer. I don't know, she said finally. I guess I got tired of trying. I applied to so many places. I went to so many interviews. Every time it was like they were looking for something I didn't have. They wanted someone with a certain kind of experience. Or they wanted someone who knew someone. Or they wanted someone who could start right away, and they didn't want to train anyone. Or sometimes I'd have a great interview and then just never hear back. After a while, it gets discouraging, you know? So I stopped trying as hard. The waitressing job is fine, it pays. It's not what I wanted, but it's stable. That must be frustrating, he said. It is, she said. But it is what it is. There was something in the way she said that, something matter-of-fact about it, that made him realize she'd probably dealt with a lot more than just bad luck with job applications. There was probably a whole story there. The kind of story where things were harder because of who she was, not just because of what she didn't know. He didn't push, though. That wasn't his place. Over the next few days, he looked at her portfolio. She'd sent it that night, and he went through the projects one by one. They were good. Really good. Some of them were just small, quick fixes, but others were more substantial. She'd built a real-time data processing system for a small logistics company. She'd optimized a machine learning pipeline for someone doing research. She'd taken on a project to refactor some legacy code for a consulting firm. None of it was groundbreaking, but all of it showed someone who knew what she was doing. He called a meeting with his development team. Not to tell them what he'd found, but to talk about the bug. He wanted to see if they'd figured it out on their own. They hadn't. They'd been going in circles, trying different approaches, getting nowhere. I have a solution, he said. He showed them the fix. He explained the logic, the same way she'd explained it to him. His developers looked impressed. They said it was elegant, that they should have seen it. They got to work implementing it. He didn't tell them where the solution came from, not yet. He was still thinking about what to do, how to handle this. The next time he went to the coffee shop, he made a point of arriving during her shift. He sat at his usual table, ordered his usual coffee. When she came over to take his order, she smiled, like they had a secret now. Did you send that solution to your team? She asked. I did, he said. They're implementing it now. It's working. That's good, she said. She seemed genuinely happy about it, like she cared about whether it worked or not. Can I ask you something? He said. What would you do if someone gave you a real opportunity? Like actual work, real projects, working with a team, not on your own. Could you handle it? She looked surprised by the question. Yeah, of course. I mean, I did it before at the startup. I worked with other people. It was fine. What if that opportunity came with a real salary? Benefits, the whole thing? She set down the coffee pot she was holding. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Maybe, he said. I'm still figuring it out. But I want you to think about it. Think about whether you'd want to actually sit down and talk about it, because I have something in mind and I think you might be interested. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay, yeah, I'd want to talk about it. Good, he said. Next week. I'll come back and we'll set something up. A real meeting. At my office. You can bring your portfolio, show the team what you can do. She walked away to take care of other customers, but he could see it in her face. Something had shifted for her too. Maybe she didn't know exactly what he was offering yet, but she knew that something was changing. Something was about to be different, and sometimes that's all it takes. One person who actually sees you. One person who looks at what you can do instead of what you look like or where you come from. One person who takes a chance on you when everybody else just walks by. He finished his coffee and smiled. He had a feeling his company was about to get a lot more interesting. He came back to the coffee shop the following Tuesday, the same day of the week and almost the same time. She was working again, and when she saw him walk in, he could see her eyes light up a little. Not in a way that was obvious to everyone else in the place, just enough that he noticed. She finished serving another customer and came over. "Still want to do this?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "Absolutely." They sat down at the same table by the window where they'd first met. The lunch rush was over, so it was quiet enough to actually talk. He ordered his usual black coffee. She got a break and sat down with him still in her work apron. "I want to be straight with you about something," he said. "I don't usually do this kind of thing. I don't usually hire people I meet randomly at a coffee shop. But what you did that night, the way you solved that problem, that stuck with me. So I looked at your portfolio, and I checked some of your references, and I talked to the people you've worked with." "Oh my God," she said. Her face got a little red. "You did?" "I did." And they all said the same thing. That you're smart, you work hard, you understand the code at a level most people don't get to, and that it's weird that you're not working somewhere serious. That's what everyone said. It's weird that you're not already doing this full-time somewhere. She didn't say anything. She just listened. "So here's what I want to do," he continued. "I want you to come to my office next week. I want you to meet my development team. I want you to show them what you can do. Not just talk about it, but actually sit down and look at some of the real problems we're working on. Show them how you think about code, how you approach problems. Can you do that?" "Yeah," she said. "Yes, I can do that." "Good. And I want you to know something else. I'm not asking you to do this unpaid. I'm going to pay you for your time. This isn't an interview where you volunteer your skills to see if they want to hire you. This is a consultation. You're valuable. I want you to understand that from the beginning." For the next week, he found himself thinking about the interview more than he probably should have. He kept imagining different ways it could go. What if his team didn't see what he saw? What if they dismissed her? What if she got nervous and didn't show her full capability? What if she got there and realized she didn't want the job? He prepared the team. He told them about the bug she'd solved, showed them her portfolio, explained the approach she'd taken. He didn't tell them that she was a waitress. He just said she was a freelance developer he wanted to bring in, to get a fresh perspective on some of their current challenges. Some of the team seemed excited. Others seemed skeptical. That was fine. He wanted them to have honest reactions. The day of the interview, she showed up at the office dressed professionally but still like herself. Not trying to be something she wasn't. She seemed nervous but not paralyzed. The kind of nervous where you care about doing well but you're not falling apart. He took her into the conference room, where his 3 senior developers were waiting. He made introductions, then he let her take the lead. He'd given her a folder with some of their current projects, some of the challenges they were facing. Real work, real problems. She opened the folder and started asking questions. Not asking like she was confused, but asking like she was trying to understand the full picture. What's the use case? How many users? What's the performance requirement? What constraints are we working with? She took notes, asked for clarification on specific parts of the code they showed her. Then, after about an hour of just understanding the scope of what they were doing, she started suggesting things. Some of them were small tweaks that could improve efficiency. Some of them were bigger structural changes that could solve problems they hadn't even realized they had yet. She explained her thinking clearly. When someone asked her a technical question, she answered it confidently. When someone pushed back on one of her ideas, she explained the reasoning in a different way, or she agreed that there was another approach that might work just as well. By the end of the meeting, the team had shifted. The skeptics weren't skeptical anymore. One of the developers, a guy named David who was usually pretty reserved, actually said, "That's a really smart approach. I wish I'd thought of that." After she left for her lunch break, his team wanted to talk to him. "Where did you find her?" David asked. "She's been working on some freelance projects," he said. It was technically true. "She's really good," another one of his developers said. "Like really good. And she asks the right questions. She doesn't just jump to solutions. She actually understands what we're trying to build. Would you be open to her joining the team?" he asked. All 3 of them said yes immediately, no hesitation. He went back to the conference room where she was sitting, eating the sandwich she'd brought. She looked up, trying to read his expression. "How did you think that went?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "I felt like I did okay, but I'm never really sure with these things. Did I say something wrong? Did they seem interested, or were they just being polite?" "They were interested," he said. "Actually, they were more than interested. They want you on the team." She set down her sandwich. "Really?" "Really." I want you on the team too. Here's what I'm thinking. I want to bring you on as a senior software engineer. That means you'll work on the same projects as my current developers. You'll have the same responsibilities, the same salary range. You'll be working on meaningful problems. You'll be part of a team that actually respects what you can do. I want to be clear about one thing, though. This isn't charity. This isn't me doing you a favor. My company gets better when you're on the team. My projects get solved faster. My solutions get better. This is a business decision. You're going to earn every penny of that salary because you're going to make my company money. She looked like she might cry, but she held it together. What about experience? Don't you need someone with more corporate experience? You have experience, he said. You solved a problem my senior developers couldn't solve. You have the skills. You have the knowledge. What you don't have is someone who was willing to take a chance on you before. That's different. When would I start? She asked. 2 weeks. That gives you time to finish things up at the coffee shop. To transition, we'll handle all the paperwork, the background check, all of that. It's pretty straightforward. For the next 2 weeks, she came to the office 3 more times. Each time she went deeper into their systems, understood more about the work, started thinking about the real problems they'd be solving. She was excited in a way that he could tell was genuine, like she wasn't just excited about the salary or the job security, though those were probably part of it. She was excited about the actual work, about getting to build things that mattered, with people who actually knew what they were doing. On her last day at the coffee shop, some of the regular customers asked her why she wasn't coming back. She told them she'd gotten a job in tech and they congratulated her. The owner gave her a hug and told her he wasn't surprised, that he'd always known she was special. When she walked into his office on her first official day as an employee, she looked different. Not physically different, but different in the way she carried herself, like she'd stepped into something that fit her properly for the first time in a long time. He shook her hand in front of the team and said, "Everyone, I want to introduce you to your new colleague. She's going to be working with you on the data processing pipeline, and she's going to help us solve some of the performance issues we've been struggling with." David smiled and said, "Welcome to the team," and she smiled back, and that was it. That was the moment it became real. He went back to his office and closed the door. He thought about what it meant that it took someone sitting down at his laptop in a coffee shop for him to see what was right in front of him all along. He thought about how many people were probably like her, smart and capable and ready to work, just waiting for someone to actually look at them. He made a note on his calendar. He wanted to remember this moment. He had a feeling this was going to matter more than just finding a good employee. The first month was not what she expected. Not in a bad way. It was just different from anything she'd experienced before. She'd thought about this moment so many times while she was serving coffee, imagined what it would be like to have a real job, to be part of a team, to work on projects that actually mattered. But imagination never quite captures reality. On her first official day, she arrived early. Too early. She sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes just breathing, trying to calm her nerves. This was it. This was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. She couldn't mess it up. The office was different from what she'd imagined. It wasn't huge and corporate. It was smaller, more creative. People had decorated their desks with personal things. Some people had plants. One person had a collection of action figures. There was a kitchen with a good coffee machine and a fridge stocked with different drinks. There was a whiteboard wall where people had sketched out ideas. It felt like a place where actual work happened, not just bureaucracy. David, the developer who'd spoken up during the interview, showed her around. He took her to her desk, which was set up and ready for her. Her computer was already there with all the software she'd need. Her monitors were set up. He'd even printed out some documentation about the current projects. "I know it's a lot," David said, "but don't stress about the first week. We're not expecting you to know everything. We're expecting you to ask questions and get up to speed. That's normal." She appreciated that. She appreciated that he was being kind without being condescending. There was a difference between someone being nice because they pitied you and someone being nice because they actually respected you. This felt like the second kind. The first week was about understanding systems, understanding how their code was organized, how their workflow operated, what the current status of everything was. She attended meetings. She listened more than she talked. She read documentation. She installed software. She set up her development environment. She got added to email chains and project management tools. She also made mistakes, small ones. She asked questions that maybe she should have found the answers to herself. She clicked on the wrong file once and had to ask someone to help her fix it. She sat at her desk one afternoon and realized she was completely overwhelmed by how much there was to know. But each day got a little bit easier. By the end of the first week, she was starting to understand the shape of the work. By the end of the second week, she was starting to contribute. Nothing massive at first. Small bugs, small optimizations, things that let her get familiar with the code without being thrown into the deep end. The turning point came in her third week. She was in a meeting with the whole team, and they were discussing a problem they'd been trying to solve for 2 months. It was one of those problems that was affecting the performance of their entire system. Their product was starting to slow down as they added more features, and nobody could figure out exactly why. They'd brought in consultants. They'd tried different approaches. Nothing seemed to work. She listened to everyone talk about it. She listened to their different theories. She took notes. Then she asked a question. Are you looking at what's happening when multiple users are accessing the system at the same time? Because I'm wondering if it's not just a code issue. I'm wondering if it's a resource allocation issue. Like maybe the way you're managing database connections when there's high traffic. Everyone looked at her. It was the kind of quiet that made her wonder if she'd said something stupid. Then David said, "That's actually a really good question. I don't think we've looked at it from that angle." They decided to investigate. She worked with David and another developer to set up a test environment where they could simulate high traffic. It took them a few days, but they found it. The issue was exactly what she'd suspected. When there was high traffic, the system wasn't managing database connections efficiently. Connections were piling up, waiting in a queue, and it was slowing everything down. She proposed a solution. Implement a connection pool with intelligent scaling. When traffic was high, it would automatically scale up. When traffic was low, it would scale down. It was an elegant solution. It wasn't overly complicated. It was just smart. How did you know to look for that? Her manager asked. I read about it somewhere, she said, and I think I dealt with something similar in one of my freelance projects. When you have that specific performance profile, that's usually what's happening. They implemented her solution. Within a day, the system's performance improved dramatically. Their product was fast again. Their users stopped complaining about slowdowns. It was a visible, measurable improvement, and suddenly everything changed. She wasn't the new person anymore. She was the person who'd solved the problem that nobody else could figure out. In meetings, people started asking her opinion. When there was a technical question, people would turn to her. David started bringing her into meetings with clients, situations where they wanted to explain technical concepts. She started leading small projects. She started mentoring one of the junior developers, but what surprised her most wasn't the professional respect. It was the way people treated her as a person. People invited her to lunch. People asked her about her background and actually listened when she answered. People were genuine with her. Not fake, not trying too hard. Just actual human beings working together. 3 months in, her manager called her into his office. She felt a moment of panic. Was something wrong? Had she done something bad? Nothing's wrong, he said immediately, reading her expression. Actually, the opposite. I want to talk about your next steps here. You've done incredible work in 3 months. You've made an impact that most people take a year to make. I want to know what you're interested in. Do you want to keep working on individual projects? Do you want to move toward a leadership role? Do you want to specialize in something specific? She hadn't thought about it. She'd been so focused on just doing the job, on proving that she could do it, that she hadn't thought about what came next. I don't know, she said. Can I think about it? Of course, but I want you to think about it seriously. Because we want to invest in you. We want to keep you here. We want you to grow with us. She walked out of his office feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not just happiness, though there was that. It was something deeper. It was a sense of being seen, of being valued, of having made the right decision by taking a chance. That night she called someone she hadn't talked to in a long time. An old friend from college, someone who'd gone into tech at a company she'd always heard was great. They'd lost touch when she'd been struggling. When she'd moved into the waitressing job, she'd felt embarrassed to stay in touch. Hey, she said when her friend picked up. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to tell you something. I got a job. A real tech job. At a company that's actually pretty cool. Her friend was genuinely excited for her. They talked for an hour, and by the end, her friend had told her about some industry events she should go to, people she should meet. The conversation felt different now. She wasn't talking from a place of desperation. She was talking from a place of actual accomplishment. 6 months in, the company celebrated the launch of a new product feature. The feature that had been slow and problematic, the one that had been affecting their entire system. She'd been part of the team that fixed it, and it was working beautifully. At the celebration, her manager brought her up in front of everyone and talked about her contribution. He talked about the problem-solving skills she'd brought to the team. He talked about her impact, and everyone applauded. Her colleagues, people she'd worked with, people she'd learned from, people she now called friends. They were celebrating her. She thought about the coffee shop. She thought about serving coffee to hundreds of people every day, none of them really seeing her. She thought about how close she'd come to just accepting that as her life. How one person taking a chance on her, how one moment of someone actually looking at what she could do instead of what she looked like, had changed everything. She looked around the room at her team, at the company that had believed in her, and she realized something. This wasn't luck. She'd always had the skills. She'd always had the ability. What she'd needed was someone to see it, someone to give her the platform, someone to take the chance, and now she had all of that, and everything was different. A year had passed since that night at the coffee shop. A full year. Sometimes it felt like it had been 5 minutes. Sometimes it felt like a whole lifetime. The company launched a new product. It was the biggest launch they'd had in years. 6 months of work from the entire team, all building toward this moment. And at the center of it was the work she'd done. The performance optimization, the database architecture improvements, the framework she'd designed for handling high-traffic situations. It was all there, woven into the fabric of what they'd built. The launch day arrived on a Tuesday. The whole office was buzzing with energy. People were nervous and excited and ready. They'd done everything they could to prepare. Now they just had to see if the market would respond. By Wednesday morning, it was clear that something special had happened. The sales numbers were higher than anyone had projected. The server stayed stable. The performance was smooth. Users were happy. Within the first week, they had more signups than they'd expected to get in a month. Within 2 weeks, they were getting approached by major investors. Companies that had never shown interest in them before were suddenly very interested in what they'd built. The CEO sat in the conference room with his leadership team, looking at the numbers. He looked over at her, sitting there with the other senior developers. She was smiling, just quietly smiling. She knew what she'd contributed. She didn't need anyone to tell her. But it was nice when people did. After the meeting, reporters started calling. Tech blogs wanted to write about them. Podcasts wanted to interview them. They were becoming a bit of a story in the industry. A scrappy team that had built something really good and done it in a way that hadn't required a massive budget or a massive team. They'd done it smart. One of the tech reporters, someone who wrote for a major publication, asked to interview him. Not just about the product, but about the company, about how they'd built it, how they'd organized their team, what made them different from other tech startups. He was hesitant at first. He didn't love doing press, but he also knew this was good for the company. So he said yes. The interview happened on a Thursday morning in the company's conference room. The reporter was smart, asked good questions, but then she asked something that made him pause. "Your team seems really tight-knit," she said. "How did you build that kind of culture?" He thought about it. He thought about the coffee shop. He thought about taking a chance on someone. He thought about how that one decision had rippled out and changed everything. "There's a story," he said. "I think you should hear it," so he told her. He told her about the night he'd been working on the bug, about coming back to find someone using his laptop, about realizing that person had skills that nobody was giving her a chance to use. He told her about the freelance work, about the portfolio, about the interview. He told her about how that one person had ended up solving problems his senior developers couldn't solve. He told her about the connection pool issue, the performance improvement, the launch. The reporter was taking notes furiously. "So she's still with you? She's still on the team?" "She's a senior engineer," he said. "One of my best people. Can I interview her?" The reporter asked. He turned to look at her. "Do you want to?" She looked nervous about it, but she nodded. "Yeah, I'll do it." The interview was published 2 weeks later. It was a long piece, not just about the product, but about the story, about how talent was hidden in plain sight in places that most people didn't think to look, about systemic barriers that kept smart people out of industries they wanted to be in, about what it meant when someone took a chance. The article was titled, "She Was Serving Coffee While Her Genius Went Unseen." It was a big headline, bigger than she'd expected, bigger than either of them had expected. The article went viral. It got shared on social media thousands of times. Other tech companies started reaching out to her, offering jobs, offering partnerships. Universities wanted her to speak at their computer science programs. Coding boot camps wanted her to mentor their students. Everyone wanted to know her story. She came to him one day, seeming a bit overwhelmed. "I don't know what to do," she said. "I have all these offers, all these people wanting me to do things. But I don't want to leave the company. I like it here." "You don't have to leave," he said. "You can do some of these things. The speaking engagements, the mentoring, we can work around that. But you should do it. Your story matters. You should tell it." So she did. She started going to universities. She spoke to computer science classes about her experience. She talked about the barriers she'd faced. She talked about luck and timing and how important it was to have someone believe in you. But she also talked about the work. She talked about how she'd kept learning, kept building, kept improving her skills even when doors were closed. She talked about how the opportunity she got was important, but she'd also had to show up and deliver when she got it. The speaking engagements turned into something bigger. A nonprofit focused on tech education reached out to her. They wanted her to help develop a program to identify and mentor people from non-traditional backgrounds who had potential in tech. People like her. People who had the skills but didn't have the connections or the resume that traditional hiring processes looked for. She came to the CEO again. "I want to do this," she said. "Like really do this, not just as a side thing. I want to be involved. I want to help." "Then do it," he said. "We'll make it work. You can keep your role here, but we'll give you time to work on the program too. This is important." She looked at him for a moment. "Why are you being so supportive about me taking on all these other things? Wouldn't most CEOs want me focused only on their company?" He shrugged. "Maybe, but I didn't hire you just to work for me. I hired you because you're talented and capable and you deserved a chance. Now that you have that chance, I want to see you do everything you're capable of doing. That's better for you than any one company can be." Within a year, the program she helped develop had placed 50 people into tech jobs. People from different backgrounds, different circumstances, but all with the same thing in common. They had the ability, but they needed someone to believe in them and give them a platform. She was teaching at a coding boot camp when she got the news. The product they'd launched, the one she'd helped build, had just won an industry award. Best New Software Solution. It was a big deal. There was a ceremony, press coverage, the whole thing. When she found out, she was in the middle of a class. She told the students, and they all started cheering for her. These were students she was mentoring. Kids from different parts of the city, different backgrounds, different circumstances. Many of them were in situations similar to where she'd been. They saw themselves in her story. One of the students, a young woman who'd been living in her car when she enrolled in the boot camp, raised her hand after class. "I want to ask you something," the student said. "When you were serving coffee, did you ever think this would happen? That you'd have a good job? That you'd be helping other people? That you'd be recognized for what you can do?" She thought about it. She thought about the girl she'd been, tired from working shifts, going home to freelance projects in the evening, wondering if she'd ever get a break. She thought about how close she'd come to just giving up, to accepting that maybe she wasn't cut out for the tech world after all. "Honestly, no," she said. "I hoped. But I didn't really believe it would happen. I was starting to accept that maybe I'd just be doing freelance work on the side forever. I was starting to make peace with that." "What changed?" the student asked. "One person," she said. "One person looked at what I could do instead of what I looked like or where I was working or what my resume said. One person took a chance, and everything changed from there." That night she met with the CEO for dinner. It had become a tradition. Once a month they'd grab food and just talk. Not about work, just about life. "I've been thinking about something," she said over dinner, "about how lucky I've been, about how random it all was. Me sitting at your table that night. You actually stopping to watch instead of just being angry. It wasn't random," he said. "You had the skills. You were ready. I just happened to see it. But so many people have skills, she said, and so many of them don't get seen. I think about that sometimes. I think about all the people working as waiters and delivery drivers and doing other jobs they didn't plan on doing, and they have amazing things inside them that nobody's ever giving them a chance to show. That's why what you're doing now matters, he said. That's why the program matters. You're changing how people think about talent. You're showing that talent comes from everywhere, that you don't need a certain pedigree to be brilliant. She nodded. She'd thought about this a lot. About the luck of it. About the randomness of life. About how one conversation, one decision, one person taking a chance could change everything. Not just for her, but for everyone she'd be able to help going forward. The story of how she went from serving coffee to being a senior engineer at a major tech company had become known in the industry. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was a story about possibility. It was a story about seeing people. It was a story about what happened when someone took a chance. And every time someone reached out to her, every time someone said her,